All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is now the music segment of the show, and we're gonna do a little bit different, kind of what we've been doing before. We're gonna actually go ahead and do a top five kind of thing.
Top five what?
Top five debut albums of all time. I think was what we're gonna do.
It was actually
this time.
my idea. I thought
it
it
was
sounded
his
fun.
idea. Sounded fun.
Instead of just talking about one song or one album like
Yeah.
we've been doing, let's talk about something that we've talked about
Yeah,
before.
we've always talked about
Debut albums.
debut albums
So
and other things we might get into in other episodes. We'll figure it out. But this episode is top five debut albums
debut albums. Now this is
of all time.
This is very important because Steve struggled with.
I struggle with this.
My top five was easy.
It was
Easy.
hard because I literally have two lists. Like I didn't understand top five debut albums of all time. Like, is it my personal top five
Pretty
debut
self-explanatory.
albums, or is it top five debut albums that changed the music industry, or do I mix and match? I don't know. It was very complicated for me to do this, so I'm gonna let Chris go first and kind of
I thought it was.
show you what his top
easy.
five are.
I thought it was pretty easy. So we're gonna start with me first.
Well, you can go
So-
number five first, right?
And we're gonna do it old school. See, we're still ghetto here.
Yeah.
We don't do graphics. We don't do special effects. I'm just gonna show you the actual CD cases. Why? Because I actually own them.
You own them, yeah.
As pathetic as you may think that is, I think it's kind of cool. But that's just
I
me.
do.
Number five,
What's your number five?
Black
Oh yeah.
Motherfucking Sabbath.
Well, there you go. It started them all.
Yeah. So self-titled first album.
Mm-hmm.
It's a classic. It's an absolute
100%
classic.
classic, yes.
But the reason why this is a great debut album to me is because it changed everything. It changed everything. This is ground zero for music that I love. Now, I know everybody watching may not be into hard rock and metal music, but I am. So, and I have the floor. The microphone is next to me. So,
You can leave a comment if you want.
comments are welcome.
Yes.
You can just don't be surprised if I interject. But dark music, heavy music, this is ground zero. I listen to this album and I think about the year it came out in. It was recorded in 69, released in 70. I try to transplant myself to that time and listen to this album and I think, whoa. And what was the album, what was one of the criteria I told you for this? Whoa. When you listen to a debut album and you say, holy shit, whoa.
Yeah, I agree.
This is that. The opening song, which is the name of the band, Black Sabbath, is still quite possibly the darkest
It's
song ever
literally
written.
the scariest song I've ever heard in my entire life.
And it's released in 1970. There was nothing, literally nothing that sounded like this. So those of you out there who like, if somebody wants to tell you that Inagata Devita is the first metal song, or I don't know, there's so many others that they whatever, no matter what they say, they have not listened to this album, because the opening track from this album blows anything that they try to say is the first metal song out of the water. And then from there you go into The Wizard, which is a blues-based harmonica song with a mean-ass heavy riff behind it. And the guitars, the drums, everything, it's so dynamic and so mean and angry for the time, because they were doing what a lot of other bands were doing in this time, where they were rebelling against the system because it was anti-Vietnam sentiment, stuff like that. But they were doing it in a way that was so visceral and so mean. Like, it was just so different. And there's an element to it that is just so untouchable. You could hear it next to songs today that play similar type music, and it still holds up. And then you have Behind the Wall of Sleep at NIB, which is an absolute
NIB.
classic.
Oh.
And then you have something like Sleeping Village and Warning, which is a full blues jam, which just shows you their versatility. It really is it kind of doubles as a quintessential 70s album, but also ground zero for heavy metal. And it really is a dynamo. I wouldn't say it's their best album because, believe it or not, they got better after this.
They did.
But it is an absolute kind of like explosion. Like you hear this for a debut album from a band that did absolutely nothing before, and no band had done anything like this before it. Not even close. It stands the test of time. Ooh. So my number 4 is Audioslave. It doesn't say their name on it. It's Audioslave's debut album, self-titled.
It's a super group, though.
So?
Yeah.
Your point being?
I don't know.
Does that matter?
It doesn't. No, it doesn't matter. But supergroup debut. Okay, I'll give it to you. No, I'm not saying.
Hey, we haven't even gotten to yours yet. Just wait until we get to yours. Okay.
It's a great album.
This is a fantastic album from start to finish. And so that's what really gets it for me, is because I'm a huge Soundgarden and Chris Cornell fan. So Soundgarden's probably my second favorite band of all time, somewhere in there, top 2. So I love Chris Cornell as an artist. And I'm also a big fan of Rage Against the Machine. So when they got together, I was like, okay, it sounds intriguing to say the least, because I'm a big fan of both. And then when they released this album and I got it, listened to every song absolutely crushes or hits on some other level, because there are some slow songs in the album too. But they're all fantastic. There's so much good stuff on this album from a vocal standpoint with Chris Cornell. The band behind him, the Rage Against the Machine band, does an absolutely fantastic job. And the reason you can tell this is a great album is because the albums they released after it couldn't quite measure up to this, even though they're good albums. They are very good albums.
I agree. This one's
but this one is just a dynamo. Like it's so good from start to finish. 14 songs and it never lets up. It's so good all the way through. And it's just one of those that I will always listen to and I will always come back to. That's what makes it a great debut album for me.
My gripe with it is, for debut albums, is because the artists on this album, they're already established. That's kind of like why I don't know.
In that band, they're not.
I know they're not a band, but they're still they're very well known.
So
I don't know. It's kind of my.
I mean, I hear what you're saying is that, but is that the artists are already well known. But however, it was the first time they did something together, and they did do albums after that. So it's not like they came together and made like
one album,
a crazy one album. They did do albums after that, and that album is still by far the best they did.
Right. So. I mean, I agree and I disagree with it. So we'll go from there. What's your third one?
You fail at a lot of things.
Whatever.
So, number 3, Gojira, Terra Incognita. So, this one for me, a lot of people won't connect to this as much as I did, because it is, I mean, what would you call Gojira? I typically call them a technical death metal band. I mean, that's pretty much what they are.
Death metal, yeah.
So, it's very heavy, very raw.
It is
very
raw.
Aggressive.
Yes.
However,
that's the reissue, right? Reissue, right? Yeah.
However, every song on the album absolutely destroys. It's so consistent. For a debut band to make an album like this is I don't want to say unheard of, because obviously we're talking about debut albums. It's been done before, but it's just not very often that I hear something that just grabs you and just every single song just never lets up. It's just consistent all the way through. And that's one of the reasons why I chose this album, is because it's of its consistency. Now, I had been into Gojira before I'd even got this album, before I'd even heard anything off this album. I'd already had 2 or 3 of their albums, I don't know, something like that. And then I got this, and I was like, whoa. Again, whoa.
Whoa, the whoa factor, yeah.
The Keanu Reeves factor, whoa. Yeah. And I'm like, whoa, oh my God. Like, their debut album is this amazing. And they really cemented that band for me as if they already weren't there. To showing you they were on to great things. And that's why I chose this one because it shows me that they were on to great things. Every single album of theirs has been that consistent. They've never let up. It's always been consistent like that. And this was really the start of it. So I had to give it some love.
That's a good pick. I kind of agree with you. I was kind of back and forth on that album as well for my top 5 debut albums. My only gripe is because their other albums have gotten a lot better than that one.
But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about debut albums.
I don't know.
And honestly,
I don't like a lot of songs on that album too much.
I don't agree with you.
I don't know.
To me,
there's a couple that don't.
No,
fit well.
To me, that album is completely consistent, and that's why it makes the list, because it is so consistent. It never lets up. Every song is a banger to me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what makes it work. Speaking of every song being a banger,
What's your number 2?
Rage Against the Machine's self-titled debut album.
That's
Now talk about a killer.
Oh yeah.
This album was like a wake-up call. Really, it was when I remember being a kid.
Yeah.
And seeing just a clip of it on MTV, just a clip
Yeah.
of Zach screaming. It was Freedom, I believe, just screaming that line, and just kind of being like, "Whoa, okay, that was something."
Yeah.
And then hearing the song and being like, "Okay, it's different.
Yeah.
It's heavy, but it's got some, kind of Jimmy Page style riffing going on, and there's elements there that were kind of unique." And then you hear Zach's vocals over it, and he's rapping, right? It's kind of the original rap rock band, but there was still an element of soul and kind of genuineness there, and anger.
Yeah.
He's spitting fire. He's really angry, and that really speaks. Even though I don't agree with a lot of the things he says, and so what? It doesn't matter, because I agree with his passion. His passion is conveyed through what he's doing, and it's so visceral.
Yeah.
And this album, from start to finish, like the Gojira album, it never lets up. It's just a banger. Every track after the next, it never lets up. And lastly,
What's your number uno? Number 1.
so I'm a thrash metal fan, so this is kind of the one that got it all started for me. Kill 'Em All, Metallica.
Oh yeah.
So
100%.
it's an
instant classic.
It's kind of an obvious choice.
Yeah, it is,
I don't want to. Well, I don't want to say it's an obvious. I mean, I guess it is because it's their debut album and everybody knows Kill 'Em All because it's their debut album. But I feel like it gets kind of lost in the shuffle because of that. Because, like I was talking about with the Rage Against the Machine album and the Gojira album, this album is incredibly consistent. Every song is a banger. But the thing about it is that
wow.
yes.
Wow.
So you hear this, and it's nothing had been done like it before. It is Black Sabbath riffs played at Iron Maiden type speeds, right? With Iron Maiden type dynamics. So you get the kind of the anger and the darkness of Sabbath mixed with the dynamics and the speed of Iron Maiden, and nobody was doing anything like that. There were other bands that came out around this time. I'm not trying to sweep Slayer and Anthrax and Megadeth under the rug. There are obviously other bands doing this, but this is the album that really blew the doors off for everybody. The only weak part of this album to me is probably the drumming. And I'm not a Lars hater. I actually really like Lars. I'm actually a pretty big fan. I think he's kind of underrated at times. But this album is where he did kind of the most basic of his stuff. From Ride the Lightning, Master, and Justice for All, he was basically a god. But here, he kind of is a little bit more basic, just keeping the beat with some gallops and stuff in there. But that was also the style of the time because, no matter what people will tell you, Slayer was doing the same shit at the time. A lot of them progressed into the more dynamic drumming later. But where you get a lot of the dynamicness here is with the guitar playing. The rhythm guitar is pretty much unmatched. This is what established James as the leader in that realm. Kirk burst onto the scene as, you know, a dynamic lead player. So anyway, I feel like I'm saying too much. I'm just rambling on at this point. Everybody knows Metallica. Everybody knows Kill 'Em All. Yeah. There's a reason it's here, because it's a great fucking album, and it really marked a change, to his point, a change in the music industry, where thrash metal got noticed, and bands that were playing more extreme, faster types of music got noticed. And it didn't happen right away. It took a little bit of time. Yeah. But this is kind of, again, ground zero. And because of its consistency, because of what it means to me, and what I feel every time I listen to this album, it belongs at number 1. So
there you go. There's Chris's top 5. Comment if you disagree or agree with him. I'm going to go ahead with my number 5. Now be System of a Down's debut album right here. Number 5 coming in. And this album literally was like my high school jam. I literally played this all the time in high school. This was my high school band. I listened to this constantly. I actually played my very first live on stage experience singing. I played Sugar with my best bud Zach, Joey, and another guy in bass.
I can't imagine you singing that song. It
I
sounds really funny.
Sugar.
I'm not there all the time.
Mushroom people. But this album, like from start to finish, is fucking just ridiculous. I'm gonna kind of look through here. Like,
let's not look through all
Soup Pea. I'm not gonna look through all of them.
It's called Sweet Pea.
Sweet Pea. War was kind of like my favorite one to kind of jam to. It's kind of the album where I started to learn how to sing and do the low growls, and I constantly listened to this album, and this is my number 5.
Do you still listen to it?
I do. I've been on lately a System tangent. I haven't listened to System in a while, and I listened to this album in full a couple weeks ago, and it's like, it still holds up. It's not, the guitar player is not very technical, but he had his own sound at the time, and it's very new, and they're very hungry in this album.
Yes,
you can definitely hear the hungriness in them.
It's very true, because I feel like after that album, they kind of got watered down a little bit. I mean,
Toxicity was definitely their album that drove them.
Yeah, but if you listen to that album now, it hasn't aged as well.
It hasn't aged. Yeah. I do like Aerials from that album. We're not going to talk about Toxicity right now, but this album, I recently listened to it about a couple weeks ago, and it still holds up. It's still raw. They have that hunger in them, that drive, and it's a fucking amazing album. This is my number 5 album of all time debuts.
Don't cover up your face too much.
All right, my bad. My bad. My number 4 album is Alice in Chains' Facelift.
I can get behind this one.
Facelift. This album from start to finish is just unbelievable. I'm not going to name too many tracks off of this. You should know what tracks are on this album. Lane Staley, and this amazing singer. Jerry Cantrell's fucking guitar work, unbelievable. The drums
and bass. Songwriting. Don't forget.
Songwriting.
Jerry Cantrell wrote the vast majority of the songs.
Yes. Flawless album. From number 1 to number 12. Flawless. You can't get more flawless than this album. And just love it. You guys should know who these guys are and own this album. Number 4. Now my number 3, you're going to love, is Slipknot's debut album. And just their whole journey with this album is insane. They toured with Ozfest when this album pretty much broke out, and their live performance of this album literally broke them to the stratosphere. This album has so many amazing songs, hits, everything. And it broke the mold too because everyone was always in late 90s, everyone was trying to copy what Korn did. This band and album went elsewhere, dude. It was so much more speedier and faster and more heavier than what they had. The Rage of Korn on it, but it was so much more heavier, and just like every song on this album fucking bangs. And
after about tracks 1 through 5, you've heard them all.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, tracks 1 through 5. But
this is just the one where you lose me. You know, I'm kind of not on board with the System of a Down, but I can kind of understand it. Slipknot.
Yeah. I mean, they're literally with this album, it skyrocketed them to stardom.
Sure,
it did.
Sure. Doesn't mean it's good.
Well, in your opinion, sure. Whatever.
Sure, yes, it is.
Whatever.
It is definitely
not your
my
opinion.
They're like assholes, right? You know.
I guess, but I mean, you can't go wrong with some Slipknot. All right, number 3 album right here, Slipknot.
I would argue differently.
Okay, Johnny.
You can definitely go wrong with some Slipknot.
Yeah. And he probably already knows what my number 2 album is. I was debating on putting this number 1, but you know it's going to number 2 for
Haven't
me.
you talked about Korn enough in the previous videos?
I have not. Korn debut album. It literally changed the music industry. This album from 1 to 12, unbelievable. Even though the number 12 song, Daddy, you really can't listen to unless you're in that mood.
It's rough.
It's rough. It's a really rough song, but this album got me through high school as well. I was picked on in middle school a lot, so in high school
did you have that haircut?
No, I didn't have the haircut.
That would have been why.
I don't know why, but I felt what Jonathan was saying in this album, and like I gravitated toward this, and I really enjoy the guitar work, the bass work, the drums, everything that was done in this album. Literally everyone copied afterwards.
It's very true.
Sepultura copied everything. It's just,
even though Sepultura was an established band.
Yeah,
but
they still copied it.
One thing I will say about this album is Korn, for me, I don't want to say love-hate relationship. That doesn't really describe it. It's more like I kind of outgrew them.
Yeah.
Like there was a time when I was a big like Nirvana fan, for example. And now I can't stand Nirvana because I kind of outgrew the music, and it seems very juvenile to me. Korn kind of falls into that category as well. It does. It is very angsty and very juvenile. It's very high school oriented. However, this album in particular is very visceral and very. There's an element to this album that I don't think they ever really recaptured. Even though there are some,
I agree with
even
that,
even though there are moments in other albums that I enjoy more than this one.
Yeah.
There's a visceralness to this. There's an anger and just kind of a rage that is and a darkness. Yeah. Like this is by far their darkest album.
Darkest, exactly.
So, and I feel like with Life is Peachy on, they kind of almost fell into the mold that they created, that new metal mold where it wasn't just dark and visceral. It was also kind of like groovy and hip hop elements.
Kind of went more hip hop.
Just there was other stuff in there.
Sound, and everyone tried to copy them.
Sure.
That's why this is the debut album as it is. And think about the number 1 track, Blind.
Yeah.
Can you fucking get any better than that?
Well, of course you can.
Well, I know you can, but...
So of course you can.
I know you can. Because my next album probably has a better opening track than this one. But seriously, to open with Blind and Are You Ready? And that fucking starts their career off.
Yeah, it's true.
Crazy.
And at the time, as a young person, it was anthemic, so it wasn't an anthem, right? So, like much in the way that Smells Like Teen Spirit was, right? I made the comparison to Nirvana. To me, Korn was very much the Nirvana of the late '90s, early 2000s, where they started a new movement, like you were talking about, which makes them important. Make no mistake. And I do feel like that Nirvana gets a little bit more credit than they deserve with starting grunge, because there was grunge before them, if people actually pay attention to that movement, which I did. Korn really did start the new metal movement. There was nobody before them. They really did start it. Honestly, the movement...
With the 7 strings and everything.
But honestly, the movement didn't even really take hold until about 2 years after this album.
Till
this album floated around for about 2 years before Seven Dust came out, before... I don't want to say Limp Bizkit, but before other bands that were doing that stuff kind of came out. And the System of a Down, for example, which was utilizing a lot of Korn stylings, even though they were adding kind of the Armenian quirky element in there. That album didn't come out until 98, and this came out in 94. So it did float around, and it definitely was the start. The only drawback I would put to it is it does invoke kind of a juvenile type feel, where it is very kind of... it puts you back in that high school mold. If you're looking for something a little bit more adult, this might miss the mark. However, I will say that this being their darkest and most visceral album, it does go more into that kind of adult music realm. Like I could almost compare it, and this is a radical, weird comparison, so don't read too much into it, but I could almost compare it at times to something like Pink Floyd, where it can be very dark and very visceral in a different way. Granted, very, very different.
Very different.
But it is probably, even though it's their debut album, it's probably, in a lot of ways, musically, at times, their most mature album, because of that dark, visceral element that doesn't really come through on a lot of their later stuff.
So there you go. That's my number 2. And number 1 album, debut album, is obviously was Kill 'Em All. I mean, you can't go wrong with Kill 'Em All at all. I mean, I'm not really going to talk about this too much since he already talked about it. The one thing I will say is...
It's a banger.
It's a banger. And we were talking about how Blind was an amazing opening track.
Hit the Lights.
Hit the Lights.
Hit the Lights is pretty ridiculous.
Hit the Lights is probably way better than Blind.
Yes.
That is an amazing
the way it comes in
track.
The way it comes in with the double kick. And the guitar is just making way too much noise. And then hits it again. And then way too much noise. And then it breaks into the pick scrape, and then that riff. That riff is just, and then just everything, like the vocals, the pace, and the structure of the song, and then the ridiculous guitar solo at the end, which seems to go on forever, and even though it's only a 4-minute song. It's epic.
Epic first track off the album.
And then it doesn't let up from there. It does not let up. It just grabs you by the throat.
I'm not going to talk about it too much since Chris already did. We are both in agreement with this number 1 album of all time, debuts. There you have it. So, do you have any honorable mentions?
I do. I do, actually. Mentions. So what... And I totally forgot about my honorable mentions. I was going to mention it after I mentioned my top 5. But
we're going to do it right now.
So... I mentioned, Kill 'Em All, right? To me, kind of set the stage for everything that came after it. It really, really changed the way hard rock and metal music was perceived and played, really, after that. So, but the first album to do that was Black Sabbath. And I had that in my top 5 as well. Fantastic album, but the only reason that takes place in its place in the top 5 is because I tend to be more into metal. If I was just more into straight hard rock and blues, then it would be Led Zeppelin's debut album, right?
Led Zeppelin, I agree with
which came out around the same time. Led Zeppelin's debut album came out just a little bit before Black Sabbath. And remember, Tom and I used to always joke about this. They were kind of like almost rivals, They would almost kind of like one-up each other. So you had Led Zeppelin's debut album, which is really dark and bluesy. It's a great album. Black Sabbath's debut album came out and was even darker. And still very bluesy, but also heavier, right? But anyway, without getting too much into that, Led Zeppelin's debut album is fantastic from a dark, moody blues standpoint. It's a great album. You know, there's not much I can say about Zeppelin that hasn't already been said. But another one that's a little bit more obscure that I want to give a little love to is a band called Ra, as in the sun god, R-A, the Egyptian sun god.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Their debut album is so great. It's so good that it makes their albums after that much more disappointing.
Yeah. Was it the one with Do You Call My Name?
Yes.
Was that their debut album?
Yes.
Debut album?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's such a great album. The albums that came after that sucked, basically.
Yeah.
Let me just put it that way. And they were never able to attain that greatness of the first album to where every song was memorable in some way.
Yeah.
Like they weren't all bangers like we talk about Kill 'Em All, but they were memorable in some way. And their second album was just a turd. I can't think of a better way to describe it. It just was so disappointing. Yeah. And I was a fan, so I went out, I bought it, and I was just so disappointed. Yeah. But anyway, first album.
Get their first album. Don't get anything
It's called
else.
Raw from One.
Yeah.
It's a great album.
Good album. I own that too. It's a good one.
And Led Zeppelin's debut album, self-titled. Most people call it Led Zeppelin 1.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I'll throw some honorable mentions myself, and I'll go ahead and go. I'm surprised you didn't say this. Iron Maiden's first album, even though it wasn't
self-titled,
even though it wasn't
with Paul Di'Anno.
Yeah, even though if it wasn't with Bruce Dickinson,
it's just not consistent.
It's not as consistent, but they did change the music industry with that album. Almost, it's kind of start of the British movement right there.
Yeah. The new wave of British heavy metal.
British heavy metal, yeah.
One of my favorite Maiden songs is on that album, though.
Yeah.
Remember Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which, by the way,
I'm surprised you
Metallica's version of that song crushes.
Yes.
But Maiden's version of that song on that album is amazing. I love that song so much. And the album, to me, just isn't quite consistent enough.
I only put that in there because it did change the way the metal world happened and everything. All the British heavy metal movement. That's one of my honorable mentions. My other one is, I know you're not going to like this, but GNR's Appetite for Destruction is kind of an honorable mention there. It literally...
Isn't the segment running on a little too long? It might be about time to end.
No, shh.
So let's fuck off.
I mean, you got to recognize how the 80s was back then, where they're all fucking makeup and hair and everything, and the GNR comes out with Appetite Destruction. It's so raw.
And they had the makeup and the hair and everything else.
They had the hair. They didn't have the makeup too much.
Yeah, pretty close.
Maybe in the music video.
They had the hair.
But album is still top debut albums of all time. And
you know what? I got to give a little bit of love to that album. It is a pretty crushing debut album.
Yeah.
I just...
Especially
it's just so played out to me.
Especially,
and overrated.
It's
so
the time.
overrated
Just
to me.
look at the time. The time that album came out, there was nothing like it at that time. Everything was so pop rock at that time.
Stop it. We just got through talking about Kill 'Em All, which came out in 83.
I know, but okay. But
mainstream.
What was huger?
Mainstream.
What was huger than Metallica at the time? Mainstream wise, huger than Motley Crue,
bigger,
Poison.
Not huger, bigger.
No, bigger. Yeah, whatever. Same.
Off the rails.
Shit.
Off the rails.
Yes.
No, you're right. Yeah. That from a mainstream standpoint, Appetite for Destruction was huge.
Yeah.
I don't care because it's still overrated. It's not that great.
Whatever. That's my honorable mention. Yeah. And I think we're overrun on this segment. Hope you enjoyed our music segment. We might do more top fives in the future. If it goes well, we'll see.
Find more albums to argue about.
And
call overrated.
Please comment on your top 5 debut albums if you don't agree with us.
You may disagree. You may think Appetite for Destruction is the greatest album of all time.
Maybe.
Just be comfortable with the fact that you're wrong. It's okay.
If he says so. It's not my top 5. It's an honorable mention. It's maybe top 6 or 7 or in the top 10.
I think it should be an honorable dismention.
Whatever. You could slap him in the face. Whatever. All right. Well, I think that's about it for this segment, right?
Are we done? Are we done with this episode?
Oh,
no, we have one more, don't we?
No, we have one more. One more to go. Yes. We have 4 parters in this episode 5.
It's like a fucking marathon
five
around here.
five.
At least we don't have a guest star, because otherwise this is...
It'll be longer. Even longer. We're going to drink some more Broken Skull. Cheers to ya.